He won't be here, did
Yes,
you say?
that's what John said, that David will not be here today.
Harold Morgan.
I finally got this put on my calendar because they always sneak up on me.
Honestly, I didn't remember we was having this one. I kind of questioned myself. I'm glad John sent the packet
So,
out and
you
reminded me.
wanna
I
try
missed it.
I know, me too, I
You
would
still
have.
loaded
I
up.
get the calendar out and stick them on there, you know it?
Yeah,
When you retire, your calendar
This, I
doesn't
had
have so many
nothing written
things on it,
down
looks like
this
I got
week
room
when the
for
week
this.
started.
yeah,
Now
I
I've got
know.
The whole
here,
week's free.
I've
So,
got something here
are
this
you retired?
afternoon, it's not on
Oh,
here,
just
and
recently?
Well, about a
Put the hell in the handbasket.
the week went crazy.
Of course, there was argument that he retired long before that.
Huh?
He still had a job.
Well, you know, I said,
Making you work for your money.
people, some
Yeah.
conservatives like John, think he retired from the time
know
he
it
starts. No, sometimes he's right. Let's call the meeting to order. It would be the Wednesday, January 27, 2016, Salina Heritage Commission meeting. And we have 3 items on the agenda currently. Are there any other items that will be added, John, or is that what you have?
That's all we're going to have today is what is on the agenda.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is a review of the 2015 Heritage Commission Annual Report to the Salina City Commission. And we've all had it in our packet. I hope had a chance to at least glance at it. And John, you'll give us a review of it, I assume.
Sure. Staff would like to give you just a quick summary of our annual report. You see these each January, and it's a document that we fill out outlining your activities to present to our City Commission. So it goes from this board to the City Commission. And for our 2015 report, we've listed some of the accomplishments and educational activities that the board has engaged in over the previous year. The Heritage Mission conducted 2 regular meetings and 3 special meetings during 2015, and 4 different certificate of appropriateness applications was heard by the board. Probably the principal one was a demolition of a fire damaged residence at 107 West Prescott Avenue that you first heard in January 28, 2015. That particular demolition and the restoration and maintenance of a lot afterwards was substantially completed by November 12th of 2015. So the compliance agreement in effect with that particular property has been completed. During 2015, 5 members of the Heritage Mission and a staff person, myself, attended a Commission Assistance Mentoring Program conference that was held by the Kansas State Historic Preservation Office in Topeka during August of 2015. The various workshops focused on the training of certified local government commissions, those that have a agreement with the State Preservation Office to do local reviews of state and national register properties in Salina. The workshops included legal issues in historic preservation, the various standards and guidelines for design review. These are typically the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines for rehabilitating buildings, and the use of various incentives and benefits to promote historic preservation. We feel that was a very worthwhile preservation workshop that was hosted by the National Alliance for Preservation Commission. On the other education angles, the Heritage Mission and Planning Department are members of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. That's the nation's nonprofit. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions is out of Atlanta, and that focuses primarily on commissions and historic preservation boards and their training. We also belong to the Kansas Preservation Alliance, which is the state nonprofit, and all these provide timely information regarding various initiatives that have taken place in preservation planning in other jurisdictions. We did receive a certified local government evaluation report on March 17th in 2015. The Heritage Mission first met with Katrina Ringler, a certified local government coordinator from the State Preservation Office, in May 23rd. On that particular meeting, the commission, I guess that was July 30th, 2014, but they discussed certified local government requirements and answered questions about the program. The evaluation report did state that the Heritage Commission applied and enforced the appropriate legislation for designated and protection of historic properties, primarily those in the state or national register, maintained a qualified historic preservation review commission. This is a board that has several required professional members to meet their qualifications, along with some interested lay members and citizens at large. We maintained a system for survey and inventory of historic properties and their management, and provided adequate public participation in public meetings and hearings that affect historic properties. That is comes from a state statute, but that is why we have a notification of surrounding property owners when there is a design review case coming up. As far as membership, the commission now stands at 6 members. Our newest member, Dr. Silverman, replaced Dwight Helmuth in September of 2015, and there is one unfilled position for an archaeologist, landscape architect, or urban planner. What we outline as far as goals and objectives, and this is where we'd like to have your input as well, is to develop additional educational materials for owners of landmark and historic district properties, and an awareness of the design review procedures affecting them, assisting property owners in nominating properties to the National Register so that they will qualify for the Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. We are currently working with a group on the HD Lee buildings at this point, and they are using some low-income housing credits as well as the Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credits on their particular project, and that's early in the planning stages. Encourage the enactment of other economic incentive programs to promote preservation, and to develop formal design guidelines for local landmarks and properties within the 4 residential historic districts. Currently, national and state register properties already are reviewed under the Secretary of Interior standards. We are working with our city website on increasing the amount of historic preservation program material that's on the site. Currently, we do have our staff reports and meeting minutes that are posted after each of our meetings here, so the public does have access to them. They also can access public meetings by using the community access channel. There is a library of past meetings that they can also access. And then finally, we wanted to determine whether the property maintenance code recently adopted by the City of Salina can be used as a tool to prevent potential cases of demolition by neglect, which we feel that's an ongoing problem there. What we have presented is a listing of membership there. We do want to find out if all that material is correct for each member, and if so, please let us know of any changes. And then finally, as far as the 2015 attendance, we go back over our past meetings and do note the meetings that's been attended by this board, as well as the preservation camp in August of last year. And I think all in all, we have very good attendance. As far as our certificate of appropriateness projects, we've had the one demolition at 107 West Prescott, the erection of a memorial stand at the former Glenn Martin Stadium, now the Graves Stadium at Kansas Wesleyan University, a trellis and front yard fences at the Ronan City Roads property at 2200 South 7th Street, and then the contact was received on October 30th, 2015 regarding the support by the Heritage Mission for a memorial marker for August Bondi. We initially met with you on that October 30th meeting, and we will get into that particular application in depth when we go to our next item. But at this point, we would welcome any feedback you have on the included material, particularly the goals and objectives you would see or want to see addressed in 2015. So this would be your chance to comment on that.
Thank you, John. specifically ask if we had any recommendations for the goals, but any other comments regarding the report that will be submitted to the city commission?
The only thing I would think about is that housing study that was done, how that impacts any of this.
Yes, we met with the city commission on Monday of this week, and it doesn't directly affect the districts by mention, but it will have some passive effects on those because there will be some areas where more attention will be focused on housing upkeep, and at this point we don't see any potential development affecting the districts, but there are several various historic properties that are protected by the conservation ordinance that are in non-contiguous areas in Salina, and we monitor those for future projects. At this point, we are seeing some expressions for incentives for housing, and we'll make certain that those apply to historic district and local landmark properties in Salina.
Bill, sorry, Judy? Okay, with that, I think no other suggestions or comments. Did you just visiting, or you want to share, or?
No, I'm here about the August bonding.
Okay, great. We'll get to that in a little bit. With none, I think motion would be appropriate to forward this report to the city commission. Would you like that?
Yes, that's what we're expecting today.
Okay. If we could have a motion
I would
then.
move to forward this report to the city commission.
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved by John Reynolds, second by Larry Johnson to forward the report to the city commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, John, for preparing that and moving it forward on our behalf. Item number 2. This is an update on a request from the Jewish American Society for Historical Preservation to the Heritage Commission and the City of Salina to support the establishment of an interpretive historical marker to honor August Bondi, a prominent figure in early Kansas history and the Salina community. John, I think we'll need your report on this. We had the review in October, so it's been a while since then.
Yes, what we had given you is some of the material that we wanted you to have during this the interim between this update and any future meeting. We're going to take formal action on this particular item, but the City of Salina Planning Department as well as the Smoky Hill Museum received contact from Jerry Klinger, who is president of the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation, and his proposal was to seek support from the Salina community in erecting an interpretive marker of some sort in Salina that would profile a very prominent early Salina citizen, August Bondi, who was a Civil War veteran but also championed the rights of anti-slavery and was a prominent local figure who was at one time a postmaster, later attorney at law in early Salina. Some of the things we talked about during our last update was if we did have a marker, where would that be an appropriate place to put that? And staff has done some work on that, as well as moving forward on the particular type of interpretive marker we're looking at. What we do have on our slideshows are other markers currently in Salina. This one at Indian Rock Park for the famous park rock there. This one at the Lawrence Dunbar School, which is a bronze plaque that was placed there in 2000. There is commemorative plaques at the Founders Park site. We have the millstone as well as a bronze plaque. Across the street from this to the south is also the site of the first ferry in Salina, so those are quite close together. The type of vertical marker that we see most often connected with this particular movement is a cast aluminum marker rather than being a bronze marker. This particular one is used by the state of Kansas for a lot of rest sites as well as other particular types of areas. This is one example. It's not going to be this particular model, but it is one option. And the Jewish American Society has used these types of markers in several communities. So they're Their request is to recognize Bondi as a significant figure in Salina by placing a plaque up with a short text. There was some concern on where the site may be, and staff has done some research on that. This is an older Sanborn map that's actually dating from 1917, but it does show areas in Salina where Mr. Bondi lived from when he came to Salina in 1866 to 1905. And this is over on 4th Street, which is 412 South 5th Street. It's across the street from the water treatment plant to the east. So unfortunately that site has been redeveloped and is now part of the surgical center, that particular home. Later in his life and retirement, Mr. Bondi also lived at 441 South Santa Fe. This does not show this Salina Regional Health Center campus, which is contiguous from the top of our arrow there, South Street, down to Prescott. This has been completely redeveloped, and in the process, the second home, which is right now currently the Salina Regional Health Center parking garage, was lost, as well as earlier commercial development there. Those are the two sites that we've located using older city directories back from 1885 to 1907 when Mr. Bondi passed away. He did practice law and was an abstract insurance agent as well at 110 South Santa Fe. This is Iron Street here with Santa Fe on the right-hand side. That particular building was replaced in 1910 with the Trader State Bank, so that original building is no longer there. But he was postmaster in the former federal building. That's this particular property. And there is a caption on this. This is a Salina retrospective slide that Salina became the smallest city in the United States to have a federal building. And then August Bondi was then the postmaster when this was taken. So we do have two sites where Bondi was associated with. We did talk over last meeting that probably a central area might be better than some remote site, like say one of the plazas in downtown. So the most logical place to us, and we've talked with some of the museum staff on that, is on the outside of using the Smoky Hill Museum as a placement setting. This would be fairly near and central to Salina, as well as being near where Bondi conducted his business. And it does have a lot of frontage on West Iron Street with planters, which you'll see across there. There's a city wayfinding sign or a new street lighting system. There are several areas that could be candidates for this, subject to approval by the City Commission, and also with the Smoky Hill Museum and Arts Humanities. They would all have some input on this. But this was given as an option because it does have some public property, publicly owned, and maintained by the city that might be a logical place to have that. So while this is purely just an update today, that is something that staff has identified. Generally, if these sorts of plaques are outlying districts in remote parks and away from the downtown, they don't receive as many visitors as a public facility like the Smoky Hill Museum, or they might be subject to, if they're on private property, they would have no assured maintenance schedule. So this would have those particular advantages. And there is around 5 feet of planter area there that would allow for that. And that currently what you see there is a flagpole on the extreme northwest corner of the museum site. And there are some additional planters on the west side of the building. But we wanted to give you an update on this just as responding to our last meeting on various sites and potential locations. We're certainly open to suggestions, and Susan Hawksworth with the museum is here today, who might also mention her input if she has any. But what we're doing today is giving you an update on this particular issue. We plan to bring a formal staff report before you at our next meeting. Although that is at the fourth Wednesday in April, we're going to try and have a special meeting in the next month or two to advance this along as time allows. So this is what we've brought for you today. What we've given you is additional reference material on Mr. Bonnie's history and his involvement with the Free State of Kansas and being a significant figure who also ran a underground railroad in Greeley, Kansas for a certain period before coming to Salina, so he has many threads. This particular project will be completely underwritten by the Jewish American Society. They will do the purchasing and will also be acceptable to design changes that this board or the City Commission may have, as well as the erection of the monument. So this is something that they're bequeathing to Salina and giving us the opportunity to recognize a very important and renowned figure. So at this point, staff would be glad to take any comments, and if you'd like to see this going forward, staff would take that direction from you.
Thank you, John. Susan, we'll let you speak in just a minute. First, let's bring it back to the commission for thoughts you may have and suggestions.
Mr. Bondi was the first secretary of the Masonic Lodge here in Salina. We're well aware of the history up in the lodge. He's also a 32nd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite. He was involved in several other fraternal organizations. A couple of those organizations no longer exist. I know the Masonic Lodge and the Scottish Rite Masons would jump at the opportunity to participate in any kind of dedication of this plaque. They would highly encourage it. I mean, it's one of ours, and we want to recognize it.
Certainly.
Well, I agree that he's certainly an important figure in Salina history and Kansas history, and is well deserving of a plaque. So the only issue to me is where it should go, so that it would be most visible and be worthwhile and enlighten our community with this information. So that's where we go from here, I guess.
Could you put the last photo back up?
Were you through, Judy?
Pardon?
Were you through?
Yes.
Okay, Larry, go ahead.
No, the one with the plaque.
Sure.
I would hope whatever they put up would be of this quality, because that's a very nice plaque. And I would hope that they would be able to do something like similar to this, rather than like the one that's over in the park for the rock, which is not going to last. This will last 100 years plus. So
Yes. And that's a matter of placement, too. There was a bronze plaque for the Indian Rock monument over there, and that wasn't able to be maintained and unfortunately was lost. So they have replaced that with a glass wood structure that you see now, and that was unfortunate. But certainly these are very acceptable. I talked with Mr. Klinger, and he's saying that this would not be a problem. The design would be up to the City Commission, as well as the text for it. They would be open to reviewing text or helping with that particular portion of the monument.
Well, I think pretty much the consensus of the board is that we should move ahead with it. And again, I agree with Judy. I think the main thing is the placement of it, so that someplace downtown and like outside the museum, I think is a good place for it, because that's near where the old federal building used to be, where the old post office was, where he was the first postmaster.
Plus, that's where people go to find the history. I mean, it makes sense to me.
It just makes sense to be in that area.
And I too, I certainly agree. I want to see it move forward. I like this type of plaque. I read them along the highway as I get an opportunity. But there's two locations that I sort of like the concept of, have no authority for either one, but the Masonic Temple is an ideal location, a historical building, and a great place on Santa Fe. The other is the museum, which is fantastic too. And I've always been impressed by the discussion of the federal building. Well, I wasn't here when it was still standing, and I'm not sure when it's tore down. Visiting the museum, I did read about it, and if Mr. Bondi's plaque could be there, possibly it would be nice to reference in another plaque at some time, if the museum could, something about the federal building, because it's a pretty interesting read about the federal building and what all went on. It's just parking lot now, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So the two kind of tie nicely together in a way. So either one would be good with me, and I certainly am excited about suggesting we move this forward. Your turn. If you want to come to the mic, please. You might state your name again. I think they like to have that on. Those watching would like to hear it again.
Okay, Susan Hawksworth. I'm the museum director at the Smoky Hill Museum. I'd like to commend John for his hard work at getting this project moving. We had been, it's been probably 5 years that Mr. Klinger has been working with us, and the museum just couldn't quite have been busy with other projects, that it just kind of kept falling on the wayside. So it's great that he picked that up and really has run with it. We like the idea of it being near the museum. That was one area that we had talked about before bringing in the Heritage Commission, of being a possible location with its vicinity to the federal building and being an old post office itself in his role as postmaster. There is, in reference to the federal building, we actually do have on display right now a model of the federal building right inside the lobby that could easily have some more signage put in place to kind of correspond between the two markers. We won't guarantee that will remain up all the time, but it's been a very loved and liked exhibit. Kids just kind of migrate right to it and all that. So we are fully in favor of having it near the museum. We have a lot of long expanse of planner there to figure out the exact location that it might work. And with the street fair, we get a lot of traffic, especially in September on that fourth Saturday, that could have a chance to be able to see that and read it, as well as our regular visitors that come to the museum.
And the few family events we've had, if it's nice weather, you always assemble outside of the museum, waiting for everybody to show up. So it's a good opportunity to read a few things that historical value as you're waiting. So I think it's an ideal location myself.
Yes, and it's been a long-term dream. I don't know if we'll ever get it into the planning to actually turn some seating into that front area with street fair, and just because it is such a nice location to be able to gather. It's always in the shade in the summer, so it's a nice area to kind of cool off and relax as well. So.
Thank you. John, it sounds consensus-wise, obviously, I think we have consensus to advance this forward, whatever your needs are internally, to make progress with it. Do you need a motion from us, formal motion for advancement of the concept?
I think that would probably be best at this point. Now will give us the direction you've had today, and we can go ahead and apply that to the forwarding this particular project. So I think approval of motion would be appropriate.
And then a location, is that something you'll handle staff-wise? You've had some recommendations here. You want that part of the motion?
I think we could probably leave that part open, because this particular will come back before you as a formal staff report. From there, travel to the City Commission. So you can say that it strongly encouraged to use a public setting such as the Masonic Temple or the Smoky Hill Museum.
Okay.
I'm not sure the Masonic Temple would be a good location right now.
Yeah.
They've got some financial difficulties, and that building may not be open much longer.
And we don't even know if they're willing.
Well, I think they'd be perfectly willing, whether or not it's a good location for the permanency issues.
I think the museum is an excellent location.
Oh, I think it's a perfect place.
Let's, if we can take a motion, then have a motion.
I would move that we advance this cause with the placement of something similar to the museum setting.
Motion by John. Do we have a second? Second by Judy to advance this particular recognition plaque to the further study, and with a recommendation that that the Smoky Hill Museum be considered as the location for it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. I think item 3. Let me get some glasses here so I can read it. Update on the Initiating Recognition Awards program for recent historic preservation projects in the community.
Thank you, Commission members. Yes, during our meeting in November, we did touch on the topic of having some sort of recognition program, and I think Dr. Silverman had experience with this in Columbia, Missouri, and he and I have talked since our meeting there to see what method they had up there. What we did have in our Heritage Mission early on, and since 2002, is the awarding of a historic preservation plaques, similar to our landscape awards, where we do have individuals who've had really good rehabilitation projects on their historic properties, or new construction or preservation of existing buildings, and awarded them some recognition on a formal meeting, generally in either April or May of the calendar year. We brought some examples for you today. One of the options is continuing that particular recognition program, or finding an alternative way to address that. I think one of the things that was touched on at our last meeting is there was a calling for locating projects by interested groups, and then having something like a top 10 projects in Salina as an alternative to that. But what we did want to do is kind of go over what we've done in the past, just to kind of acquaint you with our program. And that carried through until 2009. With the economic downturn, we haven't seen a lot of projects progressing, but we do have occasional ones that would be good candidates. One that's ongoing right now is the Marymount condominiums at the end of East Iron that is currently under construction. Those units are still coming on, and construction is continuing there, but several of those are finished now and occupied. But we can go back to some of our earlier preservation awards. This particular one is in 2004, where we awarded an award for a Jane Upright who purchased a distressed property of the old Peter Mugler house at 218 South 3rd Street that was owned by Peter Mugler, a local brewer who was disadvantaged by Prohibition shortly after he opened business here. This particular property fell into distress, but she restored that in 2004. This was a maintenance project that took place on West Ash Street, where the property owner rehabbed his existing front porch with compatible materials. And in this case, we did have Tom and Katie Platten, who moved into this neo-colonial residence at 670 South Santa Fe, and did a really good restoration jobs on the original detail, the fluting and columns on this particular property. And during that year, we also awarded the Stiefel Theater an award for their interior restoration and design for the fabulous physical treatments that they were able to reproduce on the interior of the building, as well as returning the building back into utility. On a later one in 2006, we did recognize Pioneer President's Place, the rehabbing of the former Lincoln Junior High and Washington High Schools into units of apartments for senior citizens. That was done with rehabilitation tax credits and local incentives, and that was really a banner project. We were glad to award that, as well as the adaptive reuse of the Bartlett School by, in this case, Welsh Investments. That is still occupied today. A restoration project that did the front porch on the old C.G. Wilmarth building. He was a noted architect in early Salina, and this particular rehabilitation restored the porch back to its original building. And certainly the relocation of the Oakdale Park Bridge from its former location, the south entrance to Oakdale Park, to a citizen walk, or a way of accessing Lakewood School, further up the channel on the same body of water, but moved that particular structure 3/4 of a mile up the street and now serves as a walk entrance to Lakewood School. We really did appreciate seeing that particular project, and that was a banner one. There was a house restoration also that took place on South Santa Fe at 665 for this particular family, George and Wilma Wheeler, who originally lived further down Santa Fe, but they did a good job on restoring this particular colonial revival house. This was its original appearance, and they brought that back to utility and did just a terrific job on that. We also saw some restoration work done early in 2009 on the former Bond building down there at 680 South Santa Fe, and this particular building was rehabbed on the outside. There was a conservation property who did have a porch restoration as well during that year. The two main awards, and we were very glad to award those, was the first addition to the Oakdale School, and this was for the John Shaver Partnership, who underwent the design and erection of that particular project, and we were quite thrilled to have John at the meeting to give him his recognition for that design. And also that year, we were also able to give a recognition award for James and Martha Foley for their continued stewardship of the Prescott House for, it's been 56 years plus for them, but they were something we wanted to recognize because of the long association and the care they've taken to this National Register property. So this gives you kind of samples of what we've done in the past. There are certainly other projects out there, both large and small, we'd like to see finished, and part of what we're doing today is giving you an update on that to see if you have particular candidates in mind or ways of contacting people who may have taken on projects that we're unaware of. Usually in our office we monitor building permits and development in Salina, so we generally will know when new things are coming on, but there are some restoration projects that might have slipped by us that we didn't particularly recognize, and certainly we'd be open to including those in some kind of recognition ceremony. We could progress to have something similar to a preservation award system, or to have an alternative way of doing that on a more cordial basis, like giving a top 10 preservation projects. And while this was described by Dr. Silverman as something similar in Columbia, Missouri, what we'd probably like to do is have a special meeting before we get too far along into April and May to see if we can firm this up and probably refine that and get some candidates going. So we'd be glad to take any input, and if you'd like at the end of that, just to instruct staff to go forward on this type of recognition, we'd be glad to take your direction.
Comments from Commissioner?
Yeah, well, I just had a couple comments. Some of these, are pretty old. I mean, they've been done quite a while. Maybe we ought to look at a couple of different categories. I think you ought to have one for commercial buildings and one for residential.
Yes.
For starters,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe 2 or 3 different, like, work completed in the last 2 years, or maybe 5, and then maybe 10, because kind of give people an incentive to qualify for the last year or 2 group, as opposed to
Yes.
it's already done type projects. So I don't know what the criteria was, Dr. Silverman. It would be interesting to see what his experience has been, what they used as their criteria, and just build off of that.
And certainly this
simpler for us.
And you've had some communication with him. Has he been pretty detailed with you as far as what his vision was for that?
Not particularly as far as the mechanics on how to go about that, who's going to do the contact or do some of the formative parts of identifying projects and making us aware of those. These do not have to apply to historically designated properties. There's certainly properties being renovated all the time, either on Country Club Heights or even other communities that are marginally getting older now. And we would probably want to see if we could identify projects that are more recent than ones that have been quite a long time ago, because we do want to recognize these shortly after they're finished and give their owners their due.
Other comments? You know, this is a kind of a, I guess, a personal input, but there was some houses built in the late 20s and early 30s, kind of during the Depression, and they were Sears and Roebuck houses. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them, but and the reason I know a little about it is my grandfather had one, but he lived on a farm. But you actually order them from Sears and Roebuck. They came in on a train, and the parts were numbered, and the concrete, everything was there, and you went and picked all this stuff up and had a little plan. You went and put it together yourself. And I know there must be some of those in Salina. They were kind of, as far as I know, kind of middle-income housing all over the country at that time, and some really elaborate, some not so much. But that would be kind of a neat thing to find one of those if there's one that exists that's been restored, because they have a certain classic appeal to them, to, I think, the average American at that time. So, just a thought.
Yes, the staff's aware of at least two of those in Salina, and Ms. Lilly pointed one out that's still existing out there on Elm Street or Ash Street.
On Ash Street?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There was one that was at Barry Gree's rental site at the corner of North and Ohio Street, and that's actually been moved to Solomon. That was before we had any sort of protection for those properties. So there might be one or more.
Up there by the train depot that I worked on when I was in college,
Really?
because the nails were numbered as well.
Yeah, everything.
Are they still there?
I think the houses may still be there, but they've been modified quite a bit.
So often they were added on to and modified, and they don't really resemble what the catalog, but you can still, you know, many historical museums have copies of catalogs where you could order them, and they're kind of cool. So I just wanted to mention that as one of the possibilities. I would see that as one of the categories that we could maybe a little unique that we could recognize somehow if we could find one.
The one on Ash Street, when I was working at the library, I received a letter from a descendant of someone who had that one built, and he sent a copy of the catalog picture so you could compare it. And it's pretty much the same as it was. I think there's a porch or something removed from it. It's not very big. It's very unassuming, but it's really still there. However, I think it's probably a rental, don't you think, John? I don't know. It's changed hands, because I've seen people moving in and out of it. But how do you handle something like that? I mean, you have to contact, whether the people would be willing or not. If it's just a rental, maybe, but I don't know if anybody has ever looked into that. I mean, it's like I say, it's very unassuming, but
Yes.
we have a picture of how it was, and there was, you could easily add on, because it hasn't been dramatically modified at all. But it would be fun. I mean, I've always thought it would be fun to do that. But
They're just kind of cool because they're a house that many Americans could afford at that time. And even during the Depression, they were able to afford it if you were able to do a little work yourself and put it up. And the floor plans are kind of efficient in them, but yet functional. And I was just always fascinated by my grandparents' house when I found out it was there, because I just look at that and say, and you're right. As I understand, my father helped build it, and every part of it was numbered. You knew if you could study the plan, you could figure out and it was cut. It was already cut to fit. And they dug the basement with a horse and one of those dump buckets. And but so anyway, that one on Ash should be worth talking to the people and see if there was a way to preserve that, and maybe some incentive. That a house like that doesn't cost nearly as much to preserve as certainly a more elaborate type structure. But anyway, just a thought. Anyway, we need to advance this concept to the next step. I think that's the consensus of our commission, isn't it? John, is that all you'll need for this?
I think so. In this particular case, they just instruct us to move forward on this, and we'll try and get to something to you as far as a proposal that we could vote on. And this may be at a meeting this interim between now and April. We generally see these wanting to get going fairly early because usually May is the latest we want to try and do these. There used to be a preservation month by the National Trust. That coincides with May of each year, so if we do that, that particular would be timely. So with that direction, staff can certainly move forward, and if there is a need for a special meeting to form this up, we'd be glad to kind of organize that. And certainly if you have candidates, staff could do contact with property owners to see what their interest is before taking it too far.
Well, you know, I'd ask that if you don't mind, at least make initial contact with the people on Ash that
Yeah.
have the Sears house and see if there's any
Yes.
interest. I mean, it's something that it's a project that's in the realm of could be done, I think, without a lot of. So anyway, I'd appreciate it. Is that okay with the commission?
Yeah, that's, and as far as a special meeting, I assume then we would all attend. Is that what you mean?
I
Or-
believe so. Rather than just forming a committee, it would certainly be appropriate to probably get you back together again as an interim meeting. And
Well, if this is kind of a brainstorming meeting too, I'm not sure, what would come out of it or how it would proceed, but I sure wish we would meet at a place where we could sit around a table and talk.
Yes.
I can't hear you very well, and it just be so much easier. It's so much more productive as far as I'm concerned. Now, no one else may have that feeling, but
we can certainly meet for a study session. We have those as well, and our planning commission has those. They don't always result in a meeting afterwards, but we'd be glad to organize one of those. And generally that's held in our small meeting room 107B, which has a sit-down table and chairs. And we'd be glad to organize something like that as far as brainstorming go. And it wouldn't be a formal meeting, but we could organize that.
Yeah, work session.
if it's a
around-
special meeting,
Right,
yeah.
a special work session but it's always important to bring items that are going to be advanced forward back to this so it's more
Right.
public and open. And
Yes.
that's what we
Right.
want, of course. Okay, that sounds good. Any other, let's see, that takes care of item number 3. Item number 4 are other matters. John?
At this particular point, we have other matters before you. We do have a review coming up of a new vestibule applying to the Bank of Tescott building. That is a non-contributing property in the Santa Fe Historic District down there at 600 South Santa Fe. It's not a major project. Since the building is contemporary and commercial, it's a non-contributing property, and we're working that through as staff. Something we have done in the past is have a 3 to 4 member committee who can kind of come in on demand to look at projects that don't want to wait for a full meeting of this board because generally that's a little bit harder to do. We've indicated on our staff membership there is some interest by several of you coming in maybe as a committee to look at a particular project. We've done that in the past and had quite a bit of luck, and it doesn't take long for us to get together generally a week or two to look at these projects, and we've appreciated your work in the past doing that. So we are contemplating bringing that back for you, and we'll certainly let you know. As far as members who would want to be on that committee, we show Mr. Zeke, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Kennedy, and Mr. Reynolds as far as interest goes. And we can't get more than 3 together at one time without advertising a formal meeting. So we will contact you if that project forms up and we can get a date set.
Do you want to be included in that?
Yeah.
Well, you can, and while I love to do it, don't hesitate to have the other 3 that have expressed interest go whenever they can be there. That's fine with me.
Sure.
Okay, and that'll save you having to feel badly about leaving me off. I won't.
Sure.
So,
And that would conclude what we brought for you today.
okay. What's interesting, and thank you all, and the meeting is adjourned.
Were we supposed to approve the meetings from last week,
We-
last time? We didn't do that.
We didn't have any
Generally,
minutes.
yeah, generally we'll have
There were no minutes, that's why I'm wondering what happened to them.
we actually got extremely busy as staff. There's several schools we're working on, as well as downtown Fieldhouse, so we weren't able to actually get those done. We are aware that the meeting minute was back in November 12th, and the meeting minutes are out there, but they're not written. So we weren't capable of bringing those to you today.
So we'll approve those with this meeting whenever we get them. How's that?
Yes.
Apparently, we're not as sexy as the field house.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm working on it.